Hey guys, I want to welcome you to the weekly Wednesday for the Financial Freedom newsletter, where every week, every Wednesday, we delve into something inspirational, motivational, something excerpt taken from the Financial Freedom weekly newsletter. Wherever you are, if you're listening on Spotify, on iTunes, Google, be sure to click the like, subscribe, share, comment. And without ado, let's get into the show. Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom Podcast. And I'm really excited about today's guest, Mariana Henninger. She's the founder and CEO of Brand Magnetic, and she's a former senior video producer at NBC News. We're going to talk about the documentary that she produced, and we're going to talk about video, brand story, and building your personal brand. I'm really excited to have influencers come onto the show. And so, Mariana, welcome.
Thank you so much. I don't think I've ever been called an influencer, but I think if you're doing something amazing and you're helping other people out, you're influencing them, right? So thanks.
Yeah.
Great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on, and we had connected through Podmatch, and like I said, I'm always interested in just getting people's stories. I'm very highly curious about entrepreneurs, how they got to where they are. So tell the audience your story. You've got an entrepreneurial story, and we'll get into it.
For sure. Well, I call myself kind of a closeted entrepreneur for many, many years because I didn't think I would ever own a business necessarily, or I didn't kind of go down that path earlier on. It was around college, I guess, that I discovered photography, and then went into journalism, and then realized that video was the thing I loved the most because when I was a photographer and I loved capturing visuals. I was like always a very visual person. I actually designed my first logo for my lemonade stand back when I was like 5, which I remember my grandma being impressed by. I was like, Grandma, it's just whatever. I remembered she was impressed for some reason. That kind of stuck with me. But anyway, I was a photographer, and then I realized that so much of the story was kind of left behind in photos because you don't hear people and their experiences behind that. And I sat down for a second and I was like, wow, I only wish I could combine like what I'm hearing and all these other elements that are missing in these photos. I was like, oh my gosh, that's video that's been created already. So that's kind of how I got into video about 15 years ago, and have been completely in love with just very personal, intimate, emotion-driven storytelling in video form ever since. But when I look back, the reason I call myself a closeted entrepreneur is because my entire life, back when I was a kid, I told the story of when I was 6 years old, we didn't get an allowance at the time, but I always wanted to have like my own money. I wanted to buy my own things, and I wanted just to be independent. I was like the typical kind of youngest kid in the family who got to do what she wanted, or the parents are so busy at that point that I had to just sort of be independent. I mean, they were loving. It was an awesome family, but like I just hustled from the very beginning. And so when I was 6 years old, I decided to ask my neighbor to clear out their garden shed so that I could start a little school for kindergartners. I was in 2nd grade at the time, and I had learned to read. And I was like, these kids need to learn to read. They need to they can get a leg up, going into 1st grade. And so I charged each kid 25 cents. That was so I call it like the lowest ticket course ever. And sure enough, I sort of built my own little school back when I was 7 years old, 7 years old. And so to go through everything I've gone through in terms of the different jobs I've had, and I was freelancer for a long time in my, video storytelling journey as a journalist, kind of traveled the world, lived in, I can't even count how many different countries that I've been to and reported from, but I was based in France for a while, based in Israel for a long time as well. And then to sort of leave that world, step aside and kind of finally feel like I've discovered this amazing thing I've always wanted to do, which is build my own business and just kind of own that trajectory, own all the components to it. Anyway, I could talk forever. Like one question and you've got me going like for 10 minutes. So.
Excellent. Yeah, it's quite interesting. The story where, for a long time, I didn't want to call myself an entrepreneur because I thought that meant that, you had no job and you just basically just, and, basically, kind of doing shady stuff. But, yeah, it's quite interesting how you can explore things like video is so powerful because it's got sound, motion, it's got emotions, and it's interesting to see all the different mediums like photos. I wish I had taken more journalism classes in college. So, but so we talk about, we're going to talk about the brand video, and I'm really curious because I've heard, a lot of influencers talk about short form video, the vertical video format. What are brand videos? And they're the killer marketing tool you haven't heard about.
That's right. So basically a brand, we know what brand photos are. A lot of us do. They're kind of the photo sessions that you do with a more premium photographer. And those are the photos that you use on your sales page, on your homepage, on your ads, everywhere, right? And they're just like a more polished photo that represents your brand, that kind of speaks to you, which are super important, and I love them, and I've done them myself. But when I look at those photos, I kind of have that same feeling that I had back when I was a photographer, which was, wow, there's so much it's missing here that could be combined with this, right? Combined with the visuals of you in your sort of element. And so a brand video is a 2 to 4 minute video that's focused on telling that one story that will resonate with your audience the most. And so it's not kind of a vanity video. It's not a biopic, if you will. It's not really just you telling your story. It's, a brand video in the way that I teach it and kind of really digs into what part of your story, what elements of your story are going to resonate with your audience, and how can we tell that in a very visually compelling way. So it's all about capturing the audience right at the beginning, like hooking them in, but also taking them on an emotional journey, connecting with them along the way. You want your audience watching that brand video at the very end to be like, oh my gosh, he gets me. Like Christopher gets me. He knows what I'm going through. Like I feel the same way. How is he in my head? That's the feeling that we want after watching a brand video. And when I stepped into the entrepreneurial world, like after leaving the documentary world that I'd been in for 15 years, I'm like, why aren't people doing this? Like, this is what I have been doing for 15 years, not as a marketing tool, but as a storytelling tool, and knowing that connecting emotionally is what makes people do anything, right? Think about, the things that we don't do with an emotional connection tend to be things that we kind of hate or we try to stop doing soon, right? If it's a job you hate, but you do it for the money, you're not going to be happy doing it. And you certainly are not like excited about it, right? But the things that we connect with emotionally are the things that we love to do. Like there was a study by a Harvard professor, Harvard Business School, and he came to find out that 95% of purchasing decisions are based on unbiased emotional connection. Unconscious emotional connection affects 95% of purchasing decisions. That's a mouthful. I should practice that one. But it's essentially what that means is like when we connect emotionally with somebody, and this is what we do in the brand video, you're no longer thinking about the features you don't feel sold to, and you're not thinking mathematically about like, well, can I afford this? Do I have time for this? Like, what are the features? What am I actually getting? You're convinced that, again, you trust that person so much faster. And as a friend that you trust, you no longer are thinking only in that sort of rational part of your brain where you're, again, adding like dimes and cents, or you're, can I really afford this? Do I really need this additional program? Do I really need this coach? Do I have time? Like all the other objections that we might have just sort of kind of fall by the wayside. The walls come down. And what we're moving forward with is our heart and our emotion and that connection that we've created of trust. If I feel that you are giving, that you were speaking to me, and there is some experience behind it, there are other components to this. The testimonials that you have are important. The case studies that you have are important. Your copy is important. So none of that is, I'm not, the brand video doesn't replace all these other tools that we have, but it's the idea that so many people focus on the language and the value they provide constantly. We're always like value, value, value at every turn, right? But you should not just be seen as the expert. You should be seen as the friend who's an expert. And that is somebody that we trust so much more quickly. Because when you're trusted as a friend, you're not nitpicking the offer, you're not nitpicking the language, you're not focusing on your objection. You're kind of going with how you feel, and that will make sales so much easier and so much faster.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. When I'm looking at influencers' social media profiles or websites, and usually like LinkedIn and I think Facebook, they allow you to actually create a video like on the avatar. So my question for the audience is, where should the brand video be placed, and like on which platforms, and how long should it be?
For sure. So it's funny because the first question I get asked is, what is it? And the second was like, where does it live? Where does it live? Think of your brand video as the thing that you want people to watch as soon as they get into your universe. So if they've seen a comment that you made in a social media post, if they stumbled upon your profile, if they have gotten an email from you, that's where your brand video should live. So in your email signature, every single person that gets an email from you should see it in your signature and should watch it. Every person who lands on your profile should be pinned at the top of your profile, whether it's Instagram or LinkedIn, or I actually don't know if you can pin something to the top of your Pinterest, but if you can, that's where your brand video should be. And so pinned in all those places, in your email signature. And then obviously your About Me page is like a natural home for it. The About Me page on your website is like the second most visited page typically on any website. Why? Because people want to know who you are. Who is the person behind this, right? And this is the enlightening way to look at the customer journey, right? You're hooked in by value. You're hooked in by curiosity. Like something hooked me, whatever it was, something hooked me. I'm there. The very next question I'm going to ask, well, who are you? Like, why should I trust you? Right. And the thing we forget about so many times is that there are other people offering similar things to what we're doing. Very rarely are you going to have zero competition. I actually think I have no competition, but I'm sure somebody's going to come around talking about brand videos right after me. But the idea is that you are the biggest differentiator for your offer. Everything else comes afterwards, right? Your testimonials, your case studies, like how much money did you actually make people? That's important, but that comes after, because ultimately the person who's buying has to feel connected to you. They have to feel like you're the right person for them. You may have been the right person for Sandy or for Mark or whoever. And those are great. Those are supporting arguments, right? We want those reviews, but ultimately I'm making the decision for myself. And I want to know that you're the right person for me. And so that was the tangent on the About Me page. We care about who you are, right? So your brand video should live there as well. And then I do recommend that it lives on the homepage. I don't think living in two places on your website is too much. I think that on your homepage, you're going to have some other elements there. You're going to be leading with your offer, leading with the transformation you provide, leading with the service you provide, having all those other like supporting voices, if you will, which are the case studies, the testimonial, all of that kind of is those are all the soldiers in your army, if you will. But the brand video is a very big soldier in your army. So it does belong on the homepage as well.
That's quite interesting. And then, as we have around, 5-6 minutes in remaining, but, you talked about this storytelling. And one question is, which stories to tell using, and what elements, like compelling visual, and how do the superpowers and kind of like the most common elements to, capture attention, build
Yeah.
emotional connection, all of that.
For sure. So I teach that most folks have either one of two types of stories. Sometimes it's a little bit of a mix, but you can kind of tell whether you fall into story type A or story type B. So story type A is what I call an overcome story. Most coaches have an overcome story because they're coaching people, they're helping people through something that they lived through. So if that's you, you have an overcome story. If you don't have an overcome story, in my case, I don't have an overcome story. I didn't overcome a challenge. I have a passion story. I'm incredibly passionate about emotional, intimate, personal video storytelling specifically. And so in the overcome story, you kind of have a natural story to follow. The sort of structure that I use is you've got an old normal, then you have a turning point, and then you have a new normal. So we really keep it simple. This isn't Lord of the Rings. This isn't like, the hero's journey and then the guide and then the obstacle. Like, nope, it's super simplified into these three sort of components of the story. You start one way, you had a problem, right? Something happened. At some point, you had enough, or you got in a car accident, God forbid, or whatever it is. It doesn't have to even be that dramatic, right? You could have just woken up one day and you're like, I need to do this, right? I need this change to happen, and I'm going to make it happen. And then in the new normal, you've discovered what life is like in this new phase or after this change has happened. And then if you have a passion story like me, you just go deeper. So we're not going kind of across, if you will, in the story arc, we're going deep. And to me, and just to connect the dots there in terms of like, so maybe you've identified which story to tell. But like, what elements do you look for? You look for the elements that will connect with your audience. So it's so mind blowing because even though the brand video is about you, I still resonate with our sort of idea in marketing that it's all about your customer, right? It's still about your customer in the sense that when they're watching their brand video, they should feel that connection. So when we're thinking about your brand video, when we're thinking about your story, you're still thinking about your customer. What does my customer need to feel after watching this? How do they need to feel in order to trust me? So you look at the objections that you have in particular, and you look at the feeling that the customer that's ready to buy from you has gotten to. So you take your sales cycle that's probably 40 days or longer, however long your sales cycle is now, and you look at how they started and you look at how they finished. And what we're doing is just like crunching that timeline so that we're talking to them when they're here. We're addressing these sort of emotions and this disconnect and this sort of, I call it skeptic Sam. It's the person who's just kind of, observing you from a distance, not really interacting. You're just kind of somebody they've maybe followed or maybe get emails here and there. They're not committed. You're just one of many others that they've kind of brought into their radar, but they're not committed yet. And then you look at raving fan Ramona, the person who's like ready to buy, right? And we want to speak to that feeling and get them to feel this way, right? The raving fan Ramona, the ready to buy person in your sales cycle at the end of it. So you're really identifying the points of your story that will speak to those two moments. And in terms of compelling visuals, what I teach is you don't want to be literal. I think for most of us entrepreneurs, unless you might have a job that's not in front of a computer, but a lot of us do kind of do most of our work in front of the computer. You want to use that as little as possible. And so we look at the emotions that we want to create with the visuals. There's a lot of ways to illustrate fear, to illustrate doubts, to illustrate joy. And a lot of that is like in nature. It might be in the hobbies that you do. One of my students, for example, she helps people create their first podcast, and she has a passion story. And so I was asking her, so what do you love to do? And she was like, well, I love jigsaw puzzles. And I was like, that's perfect. You are taking something that's chaotic and that's messy. And then when you look at it, you don't see order and sense. And those are her strengths. She loves systems. She loves putting things in order. She loves creating that roadmap. And you are going to create something beautiful out of chaos. And so that's just one of the visuals that she's using in her brand video. But you think of things that are kind of metaphorical like that. And nature provides a lot of opportunities for sort of these, compelling emotional visuals versus just like literal visuals.
Yeah, really, really fascinating, and it's really, it reminds me of Steven Spielberg when he's describing, when he first entered in the movie business, he was describing what these stories and storytelling through visuals and motion picture and sound and all of that. It's really, and once you find your passion, it's the rest is history. So really, and I can tell, really interesting. I know you've done a documentary. It's won a lot. It's been nominated for a lot of awards. Tell people how they can contact you, follow you on social media, check out your work, and
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I have a brand video starter guide. It's kind of the best place to sort of dive into brand video, get your thoughts flowing on how you might create your own brand video. So it's just at you can sign up for it there. And really what I tell people is like, whether you're ready right now to make your brand video or not, have something that kind of tells your story. Even if it's you speaking to your phone, that is the biggest differentiator that you can possibly have. It's your offer, it's right up there, but don't forget that who you are makes a big difference in why people choose to work with you versus somebody else. And so, but just to summarize again, the brand video starter guide is available for free on my website. So it's the brandmagnetic.
Yeah. And it really, it's really reminds me of, a lot of clients, because they resonate with my story and just kind of this hero's journey. And it really works. And especially when you're speaking on stages in public. All of Mariana's resources will be in the links and show notes. Brand Magnetic. Thanks so much for a very passionate and engaging and insightful discussion on brand videos.
Thanks, Christopher. Great to be here.
I hope you really enjoyed that wonderful, inspirational, motivational piece. Again, wherever you are listening, if you liked it, be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe. We're on everywhere: Spotify, iTunes, Google, Amazon, Audible. And without much ado, be sure to thank this show's sponsors, and we'll see you next week.